Hello, everybody. Once again, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. Today, we have only two of us, Lehman and JM, as your hosts,
Hello.
but we will be continuing with Aysle Part 2. So, while notes that at least I made are going to have some mechanics and crunch to it. Normally, our second part is more tips with GMs and players, but some of that I just noticed had crunch to it. So at least I will
And
be
we've got to
getting it.
cover. We got to do the
Yeah,
High Lord too.
yeah, we got the High Lord Uthorian and his darkness device, Dracikanos, or however you say that name. It's just because there's a K and a C, so I'm assuming both are hard K sounds because Dracikanos sounds cool to me. So yes, we will jump in. We'll do that and get everything and anything Aysle that we didn't get to last time with part one, and continue with the Game Master tips, tricks, player ideas, things to remember, and all of that good stuff. So I have some notes. I'm assuming JM has some notes because he knew what was going on. So JN, just whatever do you want to talk about Aysle to start off with?
Well, I think we mentioned it last time, and so I'll go with my inspirations to start. And I think one of the great things about Isle is it is a bridge for people coming from either other games that have a more high fantasy feel, or from our own literature that we love and we draw inspiration from. So, if somebody likes The Wheel of Time or Malazan Books of the Fallen or Tolkien or what's this? One of my friends is gonna not forgive me. I call him Brandon Sanderson. There we go.
Okay.
If you like Brandon Sanderson, this is your touchstone for bringing people in. Hey, you guys want to play? You really liked Elantris or Eye of the World, or you're watching through the Wheel of Time TV show or The Witcher. This is the cosm that you can pull everyone into. And I think I think all of the cosms are like this. I always have this idea in the back of my head and then never run with it, because why would I tie my arms behind my back? But you could run a really cool solo cosm game in any of the cosms, like just, a single cosm game. I think that could be a fun topic to do an entire debriefing on. But Isle gives you that, hey, let's start somewhere familiar. And then, as we talked about, multiple ways to then delve or pull them into the possibility ward, right? They go into a dungeon and it comes up in Trafalgar Square, looking back on the like doing a reverse of the day one Isle mission, or right, you're raiding off the coast of Norway and a cyber papacy hover car comes crashing down. So you've got ways to start local, if you will, and then branch out into the larger world. And then who doesn't love magic? Like, we're gamers. Like, everything we do, there's a new game every week, it seems, being released on Steam or on a console or wherever, that's basically fantasy focused. It's not a well that runs dry. And so a lot of people, when they come to games, they want to replicate their favorite fantasy character, and Isle is the place to drop them into.
Oh, definitely. And as I think I mentioned last time, my very first Torg, original Torg character was from Aysle. I did a priest of Dunad, and it wasn't because I didn't know other genres. It's just because I was fantasy genre was my jam,
Yeah.
and like out of all the different genres, fantasy tends to be the staple that I love the most. It's like going to a
Yeah.
restaurant and getting your favorite course.
Yeah.
And it made it easier for me, and then I got to look at everybody else from all these other cosms and start looking at them, and then later on branch out and do everything and anything. But yeah, Isle is a great starting point, whether you've only done a fantasy RPG, or if you've done a lot, but you can
Hmm.
get that foundation built on a fantasy because
Yeah.
you kind of understand that, and you can do all of those different inspirations.
Yeah.
If you want to just have a normal dungeon crawl, well, I'll set up a lot for dungeon crawls with
Yeah.
cosm
Yep.
cards like trap and things
Yeah.
like
Law
that.
of delving. Yeah.
Or you can get intrigue if you want to. Um, what I want to say, if you want that intrigue like Game of Thrones, you can add that because there's various
Hmm.
houses and stuff. Currently, the original Torg sourcebook for Aysle is probably a little bit better for that because they delve into the cosm, the source of the reality of Aysle, whereas
Yeah.
in Torg Eternity, it's a little bit more of just the realm that is on
Hmm.
the the core Earth. But it's one of those things where you have just lots of inspirations and all of that. But both of it are on Drive Through RPG. So if you
Hmm.
go to that, you can pick up both the original and use that as source material, the new to get the mechanics for Torg Eternity, and all of that cool stuff. So yes, I really love having a high fantasy realm that invaded just because high fantasy is great, and seeing
Yeah.
that work, because that was one of the things before games like Torg were out. There were always the, oh, what could I do if if I took my fantasy adventurer from this game and put him along with my sci-fi character from that game.
Yeah.
And Torg,
Now you
and
can.
yeah, now you can, and you have a system that combines all of that, and then adding the reality variants, I think, is just really, really awesome
Yeah.
with that. So let's go ahead and hit the High Lord and Darkness device and talk about those two, so we make sure that we don't leave those out. Last time we got our timing down a little. And so, Uthorian, what are your thoughts on Uthorian and or Dracocanos, the darkness
So
device?
I love Dracocanis because Dracocanis is like actively wanting someone else. Um, right. And the person that he's kind of picked is actually Ardene, the ruler and the champion of light, if you
Light.
will. And we were talking, so again, in Isle, another thing that I love that it is so starkly contrast good and evil. Like
Mm-hmm.
Darkhold, Orosh, Pan Pacifica, Cyber Papacy all have a different moral scale. Isle, Nile Empire, good and evil, right? You said in the older version of Isle, it was even more into the fairy tale uh, sort of logic where you wore your insides on your outsides, as C.S. Lewis would
Right.
say. But I love that it's so clearly good and evil, and yet the darkness device is like, yeah, she may be the champion of good, but she's got more of the attributes that I would like to corrupt because like Uthorian. I was corrected on this in my very first Torg game. um, I want to say like Uther Pendragon,
hmm
but it's Uthorian, right? Like longer O, I guess.
I've always said Uthorian, so
Uthorian. Um, he had it all. Like he had possessed the body of like he had risen in the home cosm. His armies had looked like they were destroyed, but in the end, he ended up using the darkness device to become a possessing spirit of the ruler of the realm, and he could have just destroyed it all. And instead, he sort of kind of dribbled it down the back of his leg and got kicked out. And there's this great there's allusions to it in the book, and I kind of wish I had more of that information of the quest to go free Ardenae's body from this possessing entity. But it's cool, like they won. They essentially fought back this High Lord, and then correct me if I'm wrong, this is usually where I lean on Mark, right? The elves came over, like the elves have sort of were the ones who kind of accidentally like revealed Core Earth. I'm trying to talk around a couple of plot points that have come out, but they were the ones who they actually showed up as a resistance to try and help Core Earth.
Yes, in the invasion, because of the elven guilt. Basically, the elves told a secret, and it's set up, and that's why there's so very few dwarves. Even though you can have dwarf player characters, they're very few, because they were almost obliterated. And Uthorian, when he almost obliterated the elves, he's like, "Hey, you're next." And the elves were like, "Hey, we got this secret. If we tell you our secret, will you not kill us?" And then Uthorian, basically, I don't know if it was exactly the Gaunt Man found out, and whether that was the elves specifically telling the Gaunt Man or through Uthorian, the Gaunt Man found out what this was, and that eventually did connect to Core Earth. And then the elves, feeling guilty about that, have gone to, hey, we shouldn't have, totally ratted out an entire species, an entire civilization out there. So let's go help. So then the elves go to help Ardenay, and you have the forces of light. And then Uthorian gets kicked out of Lady Ardenay's body. And as you said, now, again, it's in a lot of these where the darkness devices are actively looking for other things. So whether it's in cyber papacy, looking to become his own High Lord,
which is so cool.
Which, yes, it's just wonderful. But we're not talking about cyber papacy. Yeah. But in other ones, the darkness device kind of just does a little, hey, is somebody out there that I might replace my current one with. But in Aysle, it is really seeking somebody else. It is actively seeking. And the difference in Aysle is Uthorian knows this is happening.
Yeah. So it's not like in Tharcold where the High Lord is killed, and now there's this, we're trying to see the darkness device is biding its time to see which of these contenders is worthy. Like Uthorian and the Dark Crown basically know the other one. It's like being in a relationship when you're both looking for a way out. It's just not a good place to be.
Right. And both people realize that, hey, to unfortunately use this as an example, both people realize the fallout could be worse than what happens. A High Lord that loses a darkness device is just, he's a big target for everybody and anybody, because whoever the new High Lord is going to want to kind of like we're talking about high fantasy, medieval type things. You take over as the king, you kill all that before kings, his offspring, his brothers, his aunt, his uncle, anybody with any type of link to the throne. And that's kind of how a High Lord a new High Lord would see Uthorian. And then the darkness device, if Uthorian just leaves, then it could be stuck with somebody who's a lot lesser capable than Uthorian. Yeah. So you have this vying of Uthorian against the darkness device that is more in the present than just the kind of wishy-washiness of the other darkness devices that are like, hey, is this guy over here? No, I'll stay with my High Lord. Whereas as you said, Dracocanos is like actively seeking, and Uthorian realizes that and is actively trying to make sure that nobody else is.
Yeah.
Let me kill all of those people so that I'm the only one.
Well, again, I feel like there's a lot of really good twisted like relationships in Torg. The more I delve into it, I'm like, yeah, that's a fascinating thing to portray. But like even Dracocanos is and I won't spoil this. It's if you're a GM, read the Dark Crown section in your
Mm-hmm.
Aysle book. But things are not as bright as they may look on the surface, and Dracocanis has laid several seeds that are slowly coming to fruition, and they're both just manipulative. Because I don't know the rating of this show, I will say jerks.
Yes.
Uh,
PG-13 is what we try to.
PG-13. Hey, so that means I get one.
Yeah,
No,
one.
one an episode. I'll make sure I use it really great. Completely derailed our conversation. Sorry.
No, so that kind of sets up the one thing I do want to mention about Uthorian. Even though on the cover of the source book and other things you see him in like full armor with a great big battle axe, that's because currently he is inhabiting the body of a Viking warrior, a Viking chieftain,
Mm-hmm.
but he is a necromancer. So don't forget, game masters, that while he can be somewhat like Barak Ka and lead from the front, he's a necromancer. He's a magic user. That's his thing. So don't forget that aspect of him and just have him a physical brute, because it's just because that's his current body that he is taking advantage of. He can do all those spells. He can jump to other bodies if he wishes it, and take the different forms. He was a queen for centuries in that form. So
he's far more at his core. He's very Sauron-esque, right? Where he is a spirit that a more of a possessing spirit, which I love. I love that idea that, like, all right, well, cool, you stopped the big Viking brute, but you didn't stop Uthorian. Wonder where he is now. Like,
right. And it gives a different way of. We've said there's some parallels with the light and dark and the good and evil with Aysle and Nile Empire. Nile Empire has the inevitable return. Here, it's not every villain, but there's lots of undead. There's lots of spirits and necromancers and things like that. And Uthorian being the big one, he can just, like you said, you defeat the Viking, you didn't defeat Uthorian. So one thing I did want to mention is that I have a bunch of things, but one that was before I forget because I put it up at the top of my list is as previously I mentioned, Drive Through RPG. You can get both the original Torg source book, you can get the current source book as PDFs. There's also the digital only set, the Aysle digital only set, and you can type that in. And one of the PDFs in there is The Secrets of the Dread Covenant, which is good information towards the end for game masters. And why am I saying this? It's because they talk about packages, and what packages are similar to overlays or templates or masks in other games, where if you want to take this thing and turn it into a giant, if you want to take a threat and turn it into a giant, then it tells you all the things to do, how to adjust the wounds, how to adjust the shock, how to adjust, since it becomes very large, that it's a +4 to hit, and lots of things like that. So that was something that I recently rediscovered going through things, because
now I'm looking to see if I have that.
Because that's one of those, it's a PDF, you can overlook it very easily. I wanted to make sure that was available to other people, and it's a really helpful tool for a game master, and it's part of the Aysle, so there's a lot of Aysle things, magic users and giants and undead versions, and just different packages that you can overlay onto a threat to come up with different and more interesting threats, because part 2 is about game masters and players. So that was something that I thought, as I was looking into consolidating stuff and going over the Torg Eternity 1.5 stuff that I'm doing. I was like, oh, this is exactly the thing that I was wanting, and I had forgotten about it, but then this reminded me, and I think that is pretty Pretty cool. So tips, tricks for game masters, players, things like that. Jam.
Well, let's start with players. Isle has just a ton of great perks. And don't like how do I put this? They've got if you want to do it, it's probably in there. If you've done it in another game, it's probably in there. My friends love the Drake animal companion. So it
Mhm.
starts off like Lockheed from the X-Men, this little dragon that flies around and does just a little bit. But the more perks you put into your Drake companion, you eventually get to ride it into battle because it's grown so large. All of the dwarf, like the dwarf armor
Mhm.
perks, rune maker perk, there are just a ton of fun and interesting ways to have a magic character in this game, but not have to have spells or faith.
Mhm.
Um, they remind me a little bit of kind of like the alchemist perks from Orosh, where
Mhm.
it's like I can do these cool things that are kind of magical, but I'm not a spellcaster. I'm just a really good fighter, or I've got this cool suit of enchanted armor. I really enjoy those.
Yes, and there's lots of different magic items to everything from actually helping within a combat to just little flavor stuff. Even things like pig and a poke, which is I think it's a bag, and you call out a pig, and now you have a pig, and you have dinner if you want to use the pig that way, or
Right.
if you want to cause a diversion, whatever you might use a pig for, you have a pig.
You have
you
a
know,
pig.
the tent
I
stakes
also
that
like.
make a
Oh,
tent. Okay,
mhm.
now I have a shelter for the night.
I really like the outsider tree as well. Because remember,
Hmm.
it's not just England. It's very easy for me to remember, oh, it's just England. Well, no, it's not just England. It's also Scandinavia, kind of the Nordic countries as well. Little bit of northern Germany, I believe.
Hmm.
So you've got this outsider thing where like you can play as a Viking. You can play as a Viking berserker. Super cool.
One of my players, his first Torg Eternity character was a Viking berserker, and he went through the outsider perks, so you
Oh,
can
awesome.
do those. I believe there's a tree that the first one for every point or every wound you take, if you're fighting, instead of that being a negative, it's a bonus, and then the next
Hmm.
one increases that more, and I think it adds it to damage as well. One's to hit, one's to damage, and it might even double it. So he was the one. Don't heal me unless I'm gonna die, and then that's when you heal me. Otherwise, I want to be wounded. So that's kind of a interesting thing. And then I believe the Scald is also part of
Yeah, the
the
battle
outsider
poems. Hmm.
and that. So that is again, it's just Torg Eternity in general is very cool with giving you lots of choices within every cosm, every reality. And Isle is no difference. If you're a magic user, you can be a really cool magic user because it's the highest magic axiom,
12,
but you don't
12 new
have to.
pages of spells. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but you don't have to. You can be a good priest with miracles. You can be a
Hmm.
great warrior. You can be as an efficient warrior with the high fantasy as with all the armor and cybernetics of a
Hmm.
cyber papal or occult tech and Tharkold warrior. Um, did want to remind, if you are going magic, though, the one really cool thing is the cantrips. The
Yeah.
If any player out there has a magic user and is an Isle, please print out page 36 through 37, two
Hmm.
pages that list all the cantrips, and anybody gets those while they're in Isle.
Hmm.
And there's some really cool ones. Focus, it allows your next action to be favored as long as you're not multitasking, either multi-targeting or multi-attacking. And then even something as simple as Earth Barrier, I've had my players cast that to be able to shut off a passageway to give them enough time to retreat. And then the people on the other side, the threats on the other side, had to take a while to break through that earth barrier. And then fix objects. I always love games that just have a simple, this object's broke, fix the object.
Yep.
It might seem so small, but it's those details that I really love
Yeah.
in games when they include that. And if you're from Aysle, you can take the cantrip perk that allows you to take those 2 pages of cantrips, and then you can cast those anywhere. You don't even have to cast them in Aysle. You can be anywhere and cast those. So that is very, very cool. Other thoughts, game masters, player, cool stuff.
So sometimes it can feel overwhelming if you want to create something new as a game master in Torg, right? What does a techno demon device look like? What does I think pulp weird science is pretty easy to kind of wrap our heads around. If you played a lot of Shadowrun or Cyberpunk, Cyber Papacy, and Aysle, it's very easy to create something because, once again, just go to your favorite literature, go to your favorite game. The fact that page 50 of this book is just, here are all the magic item enhancements you can put on an item. All right, I mean, from a gaming GM perspective, that is something I think we all grok on some fundamental level. Oh, well, let me just take a couple of these, put them together. Now I have this cool magic item. Let me give it a name. Because remember, Aysle, it's going to have some sort of legend associated with it. You really want to, in Torg, you always want to give the story, like a good story hook for the reason that something is there, right? The idea of weaponized stories that we talked about a while ago is very important in Torg. So it's not just a +1 fireproof shield. It's the scale from Caladrax the dragon that was taken by the Elven Ranger, and just give it a little bit. And when you're doing stuff like that, you're going to come up with plot hooks to tie them to your game. Because right now I'm like, well, cool, if I have this shield that I was just making and I said it's from this dragon, well, that dragon's definitely coming back in the game because he wants his scale back. Sweet. Now I have an entire adventure that basically just wrote itself because I was giving 3 lines of text to a magic item.
Mm-hmm. And I love that it goes all the way up to items that can talk to the wielder when you start getting into the arcane, that they have intelligences. They start off at the lower ones that can kind of just give feelings, but then they get up to the ones that can have full conversations with the player characters, and I always love those in all my games. And although when we write officially, we do things for certain reasons to make it global, to make it available for everybody. You, as your game master, can do what you want. So if you want to take limits off things, if that's going to make things interesting, please, you have my permission to do so. And why did I just say that? Because normally you can only have 1 arcane item. You can't go above that. And one of the concepts that I'm just currently in love with is the idea of a paladin, a knight, noble, warrior of light, finding this shield, this magical arcane shield that talks to him and does really cool stuff for him, but it wants to find its mate a sword. So it gives you the quest, and every once in a while, hey, what are you doing to bring back my companion? And you have that give and take there, where you have this really cool thing, but in the distance you have this other item set, and that's something that I think could be really, really cool in Torg Eternity. So you can even have that as part of the quest, and then the perk of that quest would be allowing you to have those 2 items and continue, so you can actually work it into it. I
love that.
It's just really cool. It's something that I've been fixated on that for a couple of years, and I'm working that into one of my current games that I game master, and it was just like I just still love the idea of this shield going, hey, when you gonna get the sword? When you gonna, I don't know where it is. You got to figure that out. Last
Yeah,
time
I'm
we were
just waiting
separate,
for it.
right?
Yeah.
So the paladins having to go on this quest to find or not having to, but wants to go on this quest to find the matching sword to go with it. Um, going along with those quests, one of the things that I've mentioned in the past is how in certain ways of playing Torg Eternity, you do have to kind of bend the rules. The rule for XP is normally every act you get 5 XP. When you do it online with random people, like with Torganized Play, that makes it hard to have that group XP. So it's been proven, we've been doing it in Torganized Play forever. You can have different people with different XP, and everybody can contribute. Nobody feels like they're behind. They all can, contribute to the encounters, to the discussion, to all aspects of the game. But one of those things that does, I'll put in quotes, hurt, and different groups will have different opinions on it, is permanent injuries. If you test for defeat and you don't outright die, there's a chance that you have a permanent injury, and to regain that stat, because it lowers an attribute, to regain that is going to cost XP. And in a game where everybody in the group has the exact same XP, if you have that permanent injury, then a lot of people might think, oh, if I find a way to get rid of this character, kill it off, retire them, whatever, bring in a new character, I'm at XP, and then that's when you get the things like I'm Bob Jr., which you just take all the same perks and all the same thing. Instead of having to go through that, in Aysle, even if you have a character from a different realm, Aysle has these quests. So maybe you'll find something that is a restoration fountain, similar to the Fountain of Youth, but it does a restoration and gets rid of those permanent injuries. And you can do that with the quests in Aysle. So that way, I always like the character that has gone through a bunch of bad stuff and then overcomes it, and that's a way to go through a quest, remove that permanent injury, and now everybody's on the same page, especially if you use the group XP where everybody has the same XP, and then that player, their character has gone through a really cool thing, and they're in their mind also equal with everybody else in the group, and they haven't been hindered by that close defeat, but it took them a while to get there, so they had to go through that journey where they were at that negative attribute and that. So other thoughts as we just keep bouncing back and forth on random stuff in Aysle.
No, I think so. Your idea of, how do I want to phrase this? So I just finished reading Paul Anderson's The Broken Sword. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No, I haven't.
If not, it's it's now free and Audible. So if you've got an Audible account, you can just listen. It's 8 hours. It's a very short book. The whole, it's very Aysle, right? There's it's about a Viking child who was taken by the fairies and raised as a fairy prince, but like Odin is part of it, and the Tuatha Danann are part of it, and Christianity is part of it, and there's this war amongst the gods and the trolls and the fairies. I was reading it going, or listening to it, I guess. This is very Aysle. Like this just very Aysle, set in the right part of the world. Just whoever wrote the original Aysle, I have to believe had this idea of maybe something a little like this, but one of the reasons it's called the Broken Sword is the sword that is kind of destined to do a bunch of horrible things is given to this child, but it's going to take a massive quest to get it reforged. And so, we talk a lot about how do we structure games, and Torg is very cinematic with like acts and scenes. And, there's a temptation as a GM. I mean, I know this because you're thinking in acts and scenes. We can get kind of, well, here's the progression of things. In Aysle, as Lehman was just pointing out with the shield that has this quest to go find the sword, the player's free to pick up that quest and set it down whenever they want. So an Aysle, like, throw as much spaghetti against the wall as you want with your players. Give them, just use quests as the way to build out from the main adventure you're running from, and then see what your players pick up. Because maybe they want to go find hey, we got to stop everything and get, Sarah's character the sword that goes with her shield, because then that means we're better equipped to go fight this other thing. Or, hey, we heard this, right? It's Aysle. Look at the world laws. There's always somebody saying, hey, there's this other cool thing going on over there. Give them something, because the land between has connections to the weirdest things. Again, if you want to bring something weird into Aysle, it probably came up from a dungeon.
That's
right?
how the invasion was.
Right.
It didn't come from the sky.
Man.
It was from the land between.
That out of all of the day one adventures, the opening for Aysle is by far my favorite, with the lions of Trafalgar Square coming alive and the double-decker bus. And then you have to go down into the land between because you're fleeing into the underground, and you flee into the underground. So I love the fact that you do this in any cosm, but Aysle rewards the players. And the other nice thing is the way quests work, I feel like are a GM's boon, because there's a lot of times where I'll come up with the hook and then go, man, I got to figure out what the perk is at the end of this quest. But you have time. You don't have to come up with it necessarily the same night. Oh, you want to go search for the legendary gemstone of Kanath? Yes. Well, it's going to be very cool. It's rumored to be very powerful. What does it do? No one knows. It's just rumored to be very powerful. I'll figure it out by the time you find it.
And with those quests, they might lead you to the other realities. So you don't have to, with Torg being across Cosm and stuff like that, to use the sword and shield, somebody might have grabbed that sword, whether a good person or a bad person, and taken it to one of the other realities. So then you have to track that person down, and that. So yes, that is pretty cool. Let me look at my notes. Oh, because we are being really, really random.
Let's do it.
I had somebody on the Discord server, or the Discord forum, whatever you want to call that, for Torg Eternity. So look at that if you want to. There a lot of us meet there, and I show up and we'll answer questions. But somebody asked about wagons. Does it use land vehicles or beast riding? So I just want to put it out here, because when I was looking through the equipment, they had wagons, and it reminded me of that. I would say use land vehicles if you're just moving along and trying to get places and maneuver the wagon around things, or if you're running away, or trying to speed away, or do something, I would use land vehicles. If it was something that affected the emotions of the horse or ox or whatever, like a anti-fear check, to calm it down, that's when I would use beast riding. So I would use that as both of those. If I'm maneuvering the wagon, doing that type of stuff, I would use land vehicles. And if I'm trying to do something specific to convey emotions of calmness, or get the puller of the wagon to obey me, the draft animal, then I would use beast riding. So I'll just lay that out there, because that kind of can be it's under land vehicles, but it is an animal, but I'm not riding it, but it is a beast, type thing. So it kind of let you use both of them. And I would use the other one and just give it a -2 or something like that. So if somebody only had land vehicles or only had beast riding, they could still do the job, because you can use be open to use different skills and different abilities to have the same result. Don't lock it into a certain thing.
Yeah, the example I always give is just because fire combat is dex based, figuring out what type of firearm the other person is carrying and what its capabilities may be. I've let people roll mind with their
Hmm.
fire combat ads to figure out, oh, well, wait a second. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And since you said that, yes, the the attribute that is in the little parentheses by that skill, that is the what we call the normal attribute used for it, the
Mm-hmm.
most common. But use all the other attributes as you might see, as you might think
Mm-hmm.
about as a game master or as a player. Come up with something. As JM said, a mind would be good to identify um, with a melee weapon or a firearm or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. Switch things around. Don't just look at it as. That's why they're called ads and not pluses or bonuses or something,
Yeah.
because you add it to the attribute and it can be any of those attributes. It's just we kind of
Mm-hmm.
focus on one because that's where the majority of them are. Um, and again, let's go completely random. I got a lot of these things off, but the other completely random thing that I was reading and refreshing my memory before we did this episode is ebonite is crazy. Ebonite is this material that
Mm-hmm.
when you have metal soaked in the blood of something completely evil and darkness filled, it turns it into ebonite. And the example they give is the Caradon, which was a very extremely evil dark being, corrupted beyond belief, was slain, and it was dragon size and kind of looked like a dragon. When its blood soaked the ground, it produced enough ebonite for thrones and lots of armor and weapons and things like that. And reading in a game master, this is something that you can use, but I would say you definitely want to let the player, the Storm Knight, the player of the Storm Knight, be well aware that if a threat hits somebody with any light perks, they have to test defeat
Yeah.
because it's that.
Yeah.
It's a you can make that the biggest baddest end guy.
Yeah.
Not
But
just
telegraph it.
yes. Let the player know that have them through the acts that this is something that I would put at the end of multiple acts. I wouldn't have this as
Mm-hmm.
a one act adventure. Multiple acts, and they learn. Okay, maybe they learn what ebonite is. Maybe they find some mining being done, and they learn what it is. And then at the towards the end, they either learn, or when they see that biggest baddest end guy,
Mm-hmm.
they see the weapon, and then the person with the light perk, it's going to be really hard because they're light, champion of light. They're wanting to destroy darkness. That's why they have these light perks, but they're also the most vulnerable to this weapon. So are they going to charge forward? Are they going to allow their companions that don't have light perks take on the BBEG because
Yeah.
they won't have that instant making a defeat roll? But that's a really
It's a
like
powerful.
yes, I
Yeah.
wrote down ebonite is crazy
It's
exclamation
yeah, it
point.
is. It's crazy powerful.
It's like the
Um,
bad guy vorpal sword.
yeah.
That only I guess a storm knight of darkness might look for something like that. So I mean, it could be tempting for because Torg allows those darkness perks to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy awesomeness with the magic.
Yeah. And there's so many pages of magical items and magical effects to put on items and spells. The other thing that I don't know we've really talked about, this may be a completely different debriefing, but Aysle is one of the ones that came with multiple adventures. So when you pick up a Cosm book, right? There's the Cosm book, and then there's always the Delphi missions, which is a
Mm-hmm.
group of um not connected, just like a series of short adventures that you can drop anywhere in the Cosm. And then there's usually a campaign, and this one was uh the Revenge of the Caradon, which
Yes.
is great, a great adventure. But then they also had When Cosms Collide,
Hmm.
which another great adventure. And so if you're looking for material, so that's the other thing. I really think that like a single Cosm, uh, talking about a single Cosm campaign could be a lot of fun. But like, um, Blood on the Blasted Lands or the God Box, some of the campaigns, you may stray into other Cosms, but they're really designed to drop a group of Storm Knights in a Cosm and keep them there for a while.
Oh, definitely. And with the Revenge of the Caradon, of course, a lot of those are with Core Earth because Core Earth,
Mm-hmm.
you get to see how mix zones, and I know one of them, to prevent spoilers for players.
Yes.
At least one of them has a couple of the mix zones of the various different cosms that aren't
Mm-hmm.
core Earth, or the I keep saying cosms, I mean reality, because if you
Yeah.
want to get technical, there's technical issues with that. But the base Revenge of the Caradon is Aysle centric, and when Cosm collides, even though it's in Aysle, it connects with other cosms, and it's really
Does.
cool
Yeah.
because you can look at that and you can see how to do something in one specific reality while another reality connects to it
Yep.
in some way. So that
Yeah.
adds some coolness to it. In our Wednesday group that we stream, we did When Cosms Collide not too long ago, and we're currently in Revenge of the Caradon. So that is
Awesome.
is really cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love Isle.
Aisle,
I know I
and
keep
like you
saying
say
that,
that, we say that every
but
time, but it's like
yeah.
for it's kind of the same and different reasons.
Yes.
And Aisle
Yeah.
just opens up that. Aisle would be one of those that I think you could play if you wanted to somehow extract the mechanics from the setting and just come up with Aisle, uh, using
Mm-hmm.
the Aisle and core rules to do a medieval fantasy type thing. I think that would actually work.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to do like a pre-invasion thing of what happened 100 years ago on Isle, I think
Yeah.
you could do that and set that up for a pre invasion, so you could go other ways. There's just like you said, those magic charts are awesome. There's some in the core rules. There's also in the Isle source book, and with that law of magic, if you have that or sorry, the law of enchantment, if you spend that possibility, that Isle possibility while in Isle, you can have things happen that are outside of the axiom levels.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that happened in my specific group was we have the influencer that I talked with, the YouTube influencer and
Yeah.
TikTok or whatever Instagram influencer. His character used a pistol, and in Isle rolled that 60 plus while using that Isle possibility, and I had his firearm become a dancing firearm, so it can like come out of his
Oh,
hand
that's
and
awesome.
just like shoot. It's not a super cool thing. It doesn't allow you to like it shoot and you shoot, but it gives him a free hand. And guess what he's doing with it? He's holding up his
His
phone
phone.
so that he can record what's going on.
Uh
And then it just adds to that character even more.
yeah.
I want to say in another game, I don't know if the character is still there, but in Torganized Play, one of the players, Robert, his character, his smartphone became enchanted, and it's happened multiple times. So he has different apps that are enchantments. So yes, there's just lots of really cool things that you can work with the magic. You can keep it Isle if you want to go that way, but uh, don't hesitate on opening it up to outside axioms with the
Mm-hmm.
phone or the gun examples, because those aren't really overpowering things. They just add that flavor to the characters. And that,
Now I want my Pan Pacifica Electric Samurai to go to Aysle and get a trench coat enchanted that always hides his katana, because, I mean, that's just the way katanas and trench coats work, as I
yes,
understand it, according to movie logic.
yes, exactly. Whether it's Highlander or
Yeah,
whatever, it's just, yep, trench coats are the best.
that's right.
Um, so we are getting close to the end. Last thoughts of Isle.
So Aysle is great as a GM. Well, it's great as a player because magic, dragon pets, spirit wolves, dwarven techno magic armor, champions of light. Like, I could just go on about all of the cool characters I would want to play in Aysle. As a GM, it takes a lot of the ambiguity out of the possibility war. Yes, you are playing Storm Knights, and yes, Storm Knights are generally the good guys. Um, I've heard in original Torg that was not always, that was kind of up in the air. But we've got a good, generally positive, unless you're playing in James' game and you're in Pan Pacifica. Delphi Council will never betray you. Hard rule. But that goes even beyond that in Aysle. Like, that's where you can really have these epic showdowns between good and evil, or redemption arcs for evil, trying to draw people back from the darkness so that they don't tumble headlong and become the next wearer of the dark crown. I love that. That's kind of, for me, like the bread and butter of a high fantasy setting. And I love that one of the things that Torg does really well is they take the genres and they mechanically reinforce all of the things that you love about the genres. You've got the world laws, you've got the perks, you've got the way things work, so that you can take all of these tropes. And again, some for a while there, about 5 or 10 years ago, oh, tropes was a bad. No, tropes are shorthand so that we don't have to explain everything
Mm-hmm.
from ground zero every time we jump into something. And tropes are a tried and tested method of storytelling in cinema, and Torg is cinematic. So it
Mm-hmm.
takes those tropes and allows you to just focus and turn those dials up to 11 and say, this is what's important here. And I think they did a great job mechanically reinforcing that in Aysle.
Yes, the everything from the world loss to the cosm cards, they
Mm-hmm.
just all reinforce that Isle-ness. Speaking of cosm cards, before we leave, I do want to say there is a cosm card that a lot of people, I don't necessarily want to say have issue with, but is kind of the trap card can be extremely deadly, because the trap card, you roll a bonus die, and a random player gets hit with the trap, and that could be different than the person who played the card.
Yeah.
So if I play the card, JM's character might be the one who gets hit, and with that bonus die, it explodes. And the last 2 times that has occurred, it has been over 10 wounds dealt to the target. So that can be, if you don't have the cards, if you don't have the game masters, I probably wouldn't do it in the beginning of a combat, because then players don't have the cards in their pools to be able to play that. But it can be really deadly. Basically, after about 6 wounds, you're either soaking everything or you're going to be testing for defeat,
You're
no
dead.
matter what, because you can't, whether you have the normal 3 or you have a couple of perks that might get you a 4 or even up to 5. Even by reducing it by 2 points, you're going to be testing for defeat above 6 or 7.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you might think about doing is we talk about, of what's official, and that's what's official, but then we also talk about making the your world your own. And if that seems very harsh to your players, one of the alternate rules that I've seen, and I even used once or twice, was I allowed the group to divvy up those wounds. So
Oh,
if I rolled
I
high,
like
rolled an
that.
11,
Yeah.
then hey, here's the random person. He's going to take 11 wounds.
Yeah.
But if other people want to take a few of those wounds, and then either they can spend their possibilities or powers or whatever to do soaking or damage mitigation or whatever,
Yeah.
then they can do it. And if enough people only take, one wound or whatever, then yes, they might have multiple people taking soak, but then it's not 11 wounds on one person that doesn't have the cards, or enough people don't have the cards that their character is going to be testing for defeat and possibly die. So the cards in there as a death trap, because it's Aysle and that stuff happens in dungeons, especially the old school style. That's where you get that. But as a group and as a game master, as a table, you might change things like that. Instead of just removing it, have a little alternate way to do that.
So my two thoughts on that are, one, I love the idea of spreading it around, because as a GM, then I know that players are using resources. So I'm 100% on board with that. Sure, go ahead, use your possibility, spread those wounds around. On the other hand, like, if Dave's the one who plays the trap card, I'm gonna let that thing, like, I'm gonna let the card lie. If you play that, we're gonna get a random character, and if you've just killed Sarah's character and Sarah's going to, stare death glares at you, you bet, no complaining, you're the one who played it. I hope you enjoyed your possibility.
Right. No, so again, it allows different
Yeah.
groups and different players, or play styles, to be able to use that Cosm card. But again, there's a few times where I've seen and read and heard where people have a problem or an issue with a certain perk or rule, Cosm card, whatever. Change it, and we'll have ideas and stuff, and you can come up with something that completely beats what we say here, but we do want to give you those choices and those inspirations to change things and make it fit. So that's what I've used before in the trap. And Organized Play, we've been just using it as is, and twice it was really, really scary when the dice exploded twice. Infinity symbol, there's 5 plus another 5 plus and it's just been really.
You need a 20 on that reality test. Good luck. Yeah, and the other thing I was just gonna say, because we do throw a lot of different ideas out. This is your Torg. We said it before. Your Cosm versus your own. Enjoy it. If you make a change like that, just write it down. Like, if you make a change whatever you want. Just write it down so everyone at your table goes, okay, here's Ryan's Cosm
house rules or Cosm rules.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I do want to firmly say that that's the best. Make sure that everybody is aware of any rule changes that you do. That way there is no misunderstandings in it. So yes, change what you feel like changing, but please let everybody at the table know what's going on, because that's the worst thing. If you make a change and you realize that change was a mistake, present that to the players. The players are probably going to be very open to you saying, hey, this is something that I did, I let you all know about it, but it's just not working out for whatever reason, so I'm going back to the original way, or here's a new thing. But let everybody know in advance. Don't pop it in the middle of a session where we did that rule we did my one house rule last time, and now we're doing this new one this time. Don't do that. Nothing will aggravate, or very few things will aggravate your players more than changing something in the middle of the game. Especially if they're expecting one outcome and have put time and thought on doing their action based off of that, do not change that. So it's interesting
if there isn't.
Continue, and then I'll.
I was going to say, make a ruling at the table every time. I feel like it's always better to make a ruling than to dig and keep the momentum going. But afterwards, either write it down or go, okay, hey, here's how it's going to be going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just weird because this being Aysle being the high fantasy, that's the most times where I've noticed in my own games where those type of things happen, where the alternate rules, house rules, and stuff, they happen in all systems, but it seems like a lot of them in my own experience have been in those high fantasy systems. So it kind
Which
of
is
just
funny because that's
fits
where we
right
do
into.
most of our house brewing. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the house brews and stuff have been in fantasy, so that's where we'll talk about it in this. So, Jay, on behalf of JM and myself, we thank you for listening to this random rambling with Aysle. We had to talk a lot more because Mark wasn't here, and then in the next few episodes we might have some special guest hosts and things like that, mix it up a bit. But we do thank you for once again listening to us. Please email us at torgeternitydcd, or sorry, at torgdcd at gmail.com. Write us. We will read those. We'll answer your questions, or just if you have some other ramblings that you want to talk about, then we will read those as well. So thank you once again. And until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.
Have a good one.